Whenever you are reading a recipe for the first time, following a recipe for the first time, it's really good to read it completely through and make a plan. So I made a little plan here of how I'm going to be doing it, and it basically follows the exact same steps, but I have a couple of little modifications that I made that I'm going to walk you through. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is we are going to cook the lentils. That's something that takes the longest. So you're going to want to get your pot with your lid. Once again, I'm using a deep skillet to cook my lentils. We did actually measure the lentils for you, so you do not have to measure them. But all of our students should know at this point that you would use your dry measuring cups to measure those. And we need 1.5 cups of those lentils, which came in this brown paper bag. If you ever want to make it again, you would use those dry measuring cups to measure it out. So you're going to dump your lentils into the pot. I have not turned the stove on yet. I'm going to put everything in before I turn it on. So dump your lentils in there. Recycle that brown paper bag. And then we'll add our water. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add 3.5 cups of water. You can start with 3 cups. I like to start with, and then it says in the recipe to start with 3 cups, and you can add 1/2 cup later if you want. I'm just going to start with all 3.5 cups because in my experience, I would rather dump water out at the end like you would with pasta than run out of water and have them burn. So that is a thing about cooking lentils, is you want to keep an eye on it as it's cooking. We're going to let this cook for 15 to 20 minutes, but you do want to keep an eye on it so that the water doesn't completely run out. Otherwise, your lentils will burn. This is very much like cooking pasta though. All right, so we have our lentils and our water. We're also going to add our salt. Salt brings out flavor in recipes, and it's good to add salt to your water so that it incorporates it as it's cooking. All right, so we need, you'll see on the recipe, we need 1 teaspoon of salt. So let me grab my measuring spoons. All of our students have been learning how to measure over the past week. I've been doing a great job with this. Make sure you find your 1 teaspoon, not your tablespoon. Tablespoon's the big one, teaspoon is the small one. And if you don't have measuring spoons, you can use regular spoons that you would eat with. A big spoon that you would eat with is a tablespoon, and a small one, usually there's 2 sizes, a small one is a teaspoon. So you can definitely estimate this. I'm gonna get a heaping scoopful here, so I have more than I need of my 1 teaspoon, and then I'm gonna use my flat edge to scrape out the extra, so I have exactly a teaspoon here. I'll dump that into my lentils and water, and then I'll give it a stir. And then we're gonna turn this on to high heat. We wanna bring this to a boil. A boil is when you have a liquid cooking and you have you want it to have a lot of rapid big bubbles. So it's just like when you cook pasta. Usually before you add the pasta, you wanna bring your water to a boil. So we're going to eventually bring this to a simmer. A simmer is when you have it cooking for a kind of a longer period of time at a lower heat and you have little tiny bubbles. The way you get to a simmer is usually to bring it to a boil first and then lower the heat. I'm also going to put the lid on top of my pot. You don't have to do this, but this will contain the heat in the pot, which speeds up the process of bringing it to a boil. Now we're going to be moving on to something else, but you want to keep an eye on this. So as soon as it comes to a boil, we're going to be turning our heat down to low, medium low. It can be somewhere between medium and low heat. So all of our stoves are different, all of our pots are different, so they might come to a boil at different times. I'll let you know when mine is boiling. That'll be a good sign to check yours. And then at that point, we will turn it to low heat and we will start our timer. And once again, we will be simmering this for 15 to 20 minutes. So you'll start a timer for 15 to 20 minutes at that point. Now, this is where I am kind of diverging from the list of directions on the recipe. I am actually going to prepare the ingredients, the rest of the ingredients for the lentils before I start the recipe for the creamy radish slaw. The ingredients that we're gonna need for that are our 2 garlic cloves here and our chipotle pepper and adobo sauce. So I just want those ready to go in case I don't finish my radish slaw before this stops cooking. So we'll just have that ready to go and we can continue cooking our lentils right away. I'm gonna start with these garlic cloves. Now, if you are not using a chef's knife, say I have any of my students not having an adult help you out, what you want to do is start peeling these garlic cloves. So you want to peel, I like to pinch the top and peel off that papery outer layer. So, by the way, some of you might have kind of purple looking skins on the outside of your garlic. Some of you might have more white or yellow looking skins. That's completely normal, just different kinds of garlic. They all taste the same though. So we're gonna peel this off. Now, if you do have an adult helping you out and they want to use a knife to do this, you would take a chef's knife and turn it on its side like this and gently press down into the garlic. That releases oils that repels that papery outer layer and it comes right off. But you can do this without a chef's knife if you don't have one or if it's a student cooking alone. Either way works. I'm going to use my chef's knife to get the other one off. We just want that outer skin. It's just like an onion. It's a papery outer layer. You'll notice it start the fragrance right away. Garlic adds a lot of flavor and a nice smell. Now, this is where your microplane might come in handy tonight. This is a very good tool for our younger kids, especially even our adolescents, once again, have not gotten to the point of learning how to use a chef's knife yet. So this is a good way to grate your garlic into very small pieces. I'm going to show you both methods though. So if I have any adults helping out, I'm going to show you how to use a chef's knife to mince this. All of our students learned what mince means last week. It means to cut very, very tiny. So we are mincing our garlic. If you do use the microplane, you're just going to take your clove of garlic and you're going to grate it against your microplane. Of course, be careful. This is sharp, so try not to get your fingertips too close. And then you'll turn it over and see that it's gathered on the bottom as you've done more of this. It's probably not going to fall out. You're probably just going to have to gather it with your finger. I'm going to show you how to mince this with a chef's knife in just a moment. My lentils are boiling, so I'm going to turn down my heat to medium-low, and then I'm going to start a timer for 15 minutes. At that point, we will check it, and if it needs to cook longer, we might cook it for about 15 minutes longer. So we'll start that right now. If you are turning yours down at the same time, I can keep the time for you. And make sure you keep an eye on it throughout as we're cutting things, because the water might dry out and you want to make sure that there's enough water in there at all times. So if you notice it start drying out, I would just check it every once in a while, and you can continue to add water. I'd say a half a cup at a time. It doesn't really matter if you have extra water because you can dump it out in the end. So now I'm going to show you how to mince the garlic with a chef's knife. Once again, I would only really recommend this for adults unless any of my kids have experience using a chef's knife. Obviously, I'll leave that up to parents and guardians. First, I'll show you how to hold a chef's knife. You're going to use what we call the pinch grip. When you use the pinch grip, you take your dominant hand, whatever hand you write with, and you're actually pinching the blade. And then your other fingers wrap around the handle like this. Your other hand, whatever is holding what you're cutting, does what we call the bear claw or tiger claw. Your fingertips are curled under, so your knuckles actually go against the knife, and that protects your fingertips from being chopped off and also guides your knife. And then we're gonna do a chop to chop this garlic. A chop uses this back part of the knife. We call that the heel of the blade, and the motion is down and forward, down and forward. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna cut one direction of the garlic, and then we'll cut the other direction, so we're making like kind of tiny little squares. I just cut off the end. There's like this dry kind of brown end on the garlic that you'll want to cut off. We don't want that. And then we're gonna go down and forward through the garlic, going one direction, and then we can line all those pieces up together and go through it the other direction. Now, when you're mincing, this does not have to look good because we're gonna make it really tiny. So it's okay if you don't have like all of the same shape. If some of them are triangles and some of them are squares, it doesn't really matter. So I've cut these like tiny little squares here. The last step in mincing with a chef's knife is to do another kind of cut that we call the rock chop. It's very similar to a regular chop, what we just did, except you are going to, instead of your other hand holding what you're cutting, you're actually going to hold the knife. So I'm either going to pinch the spine of the blade, that's this top part of the blade, or I'll put my hand flat on top of it. I like to put my hand flat on top of it. The tip of the blade stays anchored on the cutting board, and then I still use the heel of the blade to do the cutting, and I'm still going down and forward with it. I'm just going to rock it back and forth over this pile until I have the size that I want. The smaller that you cut garlic, the more flavor it releases. So bigger chunks actually will not have as much flavor. So it kind of depends on what you prefer. I love garlic, so I want this to be pretty small. And we're mincing. Remember, mince means teeny, tiny pieces. So I'm just gonna rock it back and forth. You can, every once in a while, gather your pile. I also like to gather it and kind of turn it so that I'm cutting it in multiple directions. All right, and then we're gonna set this aside. If you do not have a large cutting board like me, I would use a prep bowl at this point to put this off to the side. We're not using this yet, so we're gonna need this in a little bit. We're using this garlic in our lentils. So once these are done boiling, we're gonna be frying this with our lentils. So just set it off to the side. And then I like to stay nice and clean as I'm cooking. That helps me stay organized. Wipe off my knife, and then we're gonna move on to the next thing. Now the next thing we're preparing for our lentils is our chipotle pepper and adobo. That came in a little container like this. You're gonna want to, I'm gonna use my spoon that I would cook with and just scoop out that pepper. Some of you got one pepper, some of you got two. It depended on the size. So if you got if there were very small peppers, then you would have gotten two. If you got a larger one, you got one. Either way, I would use the whole thing. Save the sauce, don't throw this away. This adds a lot of flavor, so make sure you do not throw that away. Now, a chipotle pepper is a jalapeno that's been dried and preserved. And the adobo sauce is, it's like a tomato-based sauce that adds a lot of spice and flavor. If you don't like spicy, then I would recommend seeding your chipotle pepper. To seed is actually, ironically, to take the seeds out. So you might see on recipes de-seed or seed. Either way, it means take the seeds out. So I'm going to show you how to do that. If you like spicy, you can leave those right in there. And once again, we are going to mince this. I'm going to show you how to do this with a paring knife, so that if I have any younger students helping out, or I'm sorry, if I have any younger students making this without an adult helping out, then you're going to use this to do all of your cutting. Any adults can use a chef's knife. So I'll show you both methods. Now, to cut this open to take the seeds out, you're going to want to use the tip of your blade to do the cutting. Now you can do this with a chef's knife or a paring knife like I'm doing. And you're going to do the type of cutting that we call a slice. So this is the third method of cutting. So we can do this with either tool. Whenever you use a paring knife, you are going to be doing a slice motion. To do a slice is to use the tip of the blade to do the cutting, and you're going to push down and pull back towards yourself. So whenever you're using a paring knife, this is the method you're going to use. I'm just going to use my bear claw. Fingertips are curled under. Yes, this is messy. Cooking gets messy. And chipotle peppers are slimy, but trust me, they're good. They add so much flavor. They add smokiness and spice. We're just going to slice it right in half. That allows us to open the pepper. Be careful, try not to touch the inside if you can, especially if you don't want the spice. And then you're going to use the tip of your spoon to scrape out those seeds. This is only if you want a lot of spice, keep those seeds in there. So if you don't want a lot of spice, if you're sensitive to it at all, take them out. You're just scraping them out with your spoon. And then from here, you can use either, I'll show you with your paring knife, you can cut it into slices using your slice motion. Just be careful not to cut yourself. You're just pushing down and pulling back, so you're cutting it into strips. And then you can turn these strips the other way and cut it into, it's basically like tiny little squares. Once again, we're mincing, so we want these small. If you are using a chef's knife, you can either do slices like I just did with my paring knife, push down and pull back, still using my pinch grip here, or you can do a chop and cut it into slices, down and forward, still using my bear claw that protects my fingertips, especially when I'm cutting something small. It can be extra dangerous. I'm going to turn these strips the other way so that I can cut them into little squares. And then I'm going to pile it all together and do a rock chop over this to make it even smaller. And we actually like spicy over here, so I'm actually gonna incorporate my seeds into this. Once again, throw those seeds away if you are sensitive to spice at all. So once again, I'm doing my rock chop just like I did with my garlic. I'm just going to go back and forth, and I'm just going down and forward with that knife using the back part of the blade to do the cutting. All right, so once again, if you don't have a very large cutting board, you're going to want to put this, I would actually just put it right back into the container with the adobo sauce. Once again, we want that sauce. It adds so much delicious flavor to our lentils. So you can put that right back in there. And then I'm going to wipe down my cutting board because we're going to be cutting things that are going to go into the radish slaw. The garlic and the chipotle pepper, both of those are going into the lentils in a little bit. All right, so I'm going to use my wet dish rag, clean up a little bit, and then we'll get started on our slaw. This would be a great time to check your lentils. Make sure they're not drying out. You can give them a stir. I'm going to do that. And just add more water if it is drying out. Once again, you can always drain the water if you have too much water. Mine looks good for now, so I'm just going to put the lid back on and let that keep cooking. My timer still has 4 minutes left, and I usually actually do end up cooking them for 20 minutes, but it depends on the texture that you like. If you want a little bit of a firmer texture where the lentils kind of keep their shape, then you won't want to cook it as long. they get mushier as you cook them. So if you like refried beans, the mushiness of beans, then you might want to cook them a little longer. And you can always try them. Chefs always try foods as they go. They try their dishes as they cook so that they know what it needs. So feel free to do that. All right. So now we're gonna go on to our slaw. We're gonna start with making our dressing. Because after we make our dressing, we'll add all of the ingredients into the bowl that we made our dressing in. This is where a lot of measuring comes in, which is it's the techniques that we've been working on in class. So it'll be a good way to show off your skills. You'll notice that on the recipe, as always, the ingredients are listed at the top. That tells you what you need, and it tells you how much you need. Sometimes it also tells you how to prepare things. And just like our salads last week, the dressing, or in this case the radish slaw, is going to be on the other side. So we're starting right here. We're going to start making the dressing with those top couple of ingredients. I'm actually going to start with the lime here. Now, our lime, in our adolescent classes, we learned about zest. This recipe does not call for this, but I want to show another use of a microplane for any students who have not used this before, so that you know different ways that you can use it. If you like a lot of lime, if you like that flavor a lot, this is a great thing to add to the recipe that's not already in it. I love lime. It adds a nice freshness. It's a little bit crisp. So feel free to do this, or feel free to skip it. The zest of a citrus fruit is the outer layer. It adds that outer layer has a ton of flavor, but it's very tough in texture. So it's not very nice to eat, but it tastes really good. The way we get that flavor is by grating it into very small little bits. So of course, make sure you rinse your lime, and then you can use your microplane to zest it, which just scrapes off that outer layer of skin. Now, the layer right underneath that green part is kind of bitter. It's like the white part. It's not very tasty. So it's like when you peel a carrot, where you just kind of scrape it and turn it, scrape it and turn it. Once again, you don't have to do this. You don't have to add the zest. I just wanted to show you another way that you can use this tool that we gave you. All right, and then once again, just like the garlic, it'll collect underneath, where you just kind of gotta scrape it out with your finger. It won't all fall in to the bowl. Now, once again, zest is the outer layer of citrus fruit. So lemons, limes, oranges, they all have a lot of flavor, and you can do this with any of those things. All right, I just did a little, I didn't do the whole thing. Once again, this recipe doesn't call for the zest. I just wanted to share. All right, so we are going to juice this lime. I think this requires, it requires 1 whole lime. So we're going to start by cutting it in half. You can either use your paring knife, or you can use your chef's knife to do that. And when you cut a citrus fruit in half to juice it, if you think of the points of the lime as, if you think of this as planet Earth and you think of those as the North and South Pole, then you want to cut it around the equator so that you have 2 round pieces, not 2 oval pieces. That'll make it easiest to juice. My timer did just go off for 15 minutes. I'm going to check on my lentils. So I would recommend doing the same. And I am going to cook this for 5 more minutes. You'll see the lentils here are still kind of in their full shape. I like some of them to be a little bit mushier. If you don't want that, if you prefer them to be a little bit firmer, then you can take them off the heat at this point. And I do see some liquid here still, so I think that's enough for this to continue cooking without me adding more, but I'm going to keep an eye on it. So I'm going to set the timer for 5 more minutes, and then I'll keep an eye on it to make sure nothing is burning. All right, back to my lime. So we'll cut this in half. If I wanted lime wedges, I would cut it the opposite way. I'd cut it from the North Pole to the South Pole so that I had like an oval shape instead of a round shape. All right, and then I'm gonna squeeze the juice out into my mixing bowl. That's where I was just grating some of my lime zest. So we are making the dressing for the radish slaw right now. A slaw, it's like coleslaw. I'm sure you've all heard of coleslaw before. I'm sure you've all had it. This is not the same thing as coleslaw, but it's in the same family. It's basically a little bit, it's like a little salad. So we are making a salad dressing here. I'm just trying to get all the juice out that I can. And then you can get rid of the rest of the lime. And then we are going to add our half of a cup of, you could use sour cream if you ever make this again. We're using some plain non-fat Greek yogurt. I love to use this as an alternative to sour cream, just because it has less fat, but sour cream is also great. Now, you'll see that I'm sure everyone's is a little bit separated. There's some liquid and some kind of more solid parts. You want to make sure you mix it very well. It's not bad, it's just what it naturally does. And Greek yogurt is just a thicker version of regular yogurt. It has a lot of protein, which is a nutrient. All of our students are going to be learning about that in the next couple of weeks. All right, so I'm mixing it very well, and then, like I said before, I like to use a rubber spatula. You don't have to use this, but that way, that's a good way to get all of the yogurt out. And then we're going to add our sugar, or whatever sweetener you are using. I'm just using plain old white sugar. And we need 2 teaspoons of that. If you are a pro at cooking, feel free to estimate this. All of our students have been learning how to measure, so this is some good practice here. As always, you want to make sure you have a heaping scoopful. You have more than you need. And then use a flat edge. I'm using the lid of my container to scrape off that extra. So I've got 1 teaspoon and then 2 teaspoons. And then that makes our dressing, so we'll mix that up. I'm just going to use this spoon. And then I'm going to check my lentils here. They look like they're getting a little dry. Still enough water that it's steaming, so as long as it's not sticking, it should be good. Once it starts sticking, definitely add more water at that point. Still have a minute left for that to cook, and then we'll turn that off. So we just want to mix this until it's well combined. If you end up tasting this and you're like, it needs a little more flavor, I'd add just a pinch of salt. Salt, once again, brings out flavor. So it usually brings out the flavor of, whatever you are adding it to. All right, so I have my dressing there ready to go. And then we are going to be cutting up all of these ingredients here and adding them as we cut them up. So let's start with our radishes. These are these red things. Once again, make sure you wash them. They might still have some kind of brown parts or dry looking parts.
We're using all the radishes, right?
Yes. And you can measure using your dry measuring cups if you want to be exact, but we gave you pretty much the exact amount you're going to need. So I'm going to use them all, but you can measure them and use the exact amount that the recipe calls for, which is 1.5 cups. I think, yep. So my 5 minutes just went off. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my stove. Give this a stir. And then I do have a little bit of liquid left, but it's so little that I'm just going to leave it in there. It'll eventually evaporate when we continue to cook these. So my stove is off, and I'm going to leave the lid on top of my lentils while we continue to prepare our radish slaw. Once we're done with our radish slaw, we will finish making the lentils, cook our tortillas, and then we'll be ready to go. All right, so with your radishes, once again, I'm going to cut off like these kind of brown spotty parts. So I'll start with that. Some will be better than others. You don't have to get every little piece off. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, you can do this with a chef's knife or a paring knife. With a paring knife, you're gonna do the same thing. It's just gonna be on a smaller scale. So either way, you're just using the blade to shave off any parts that you don't want. And then you're gonna do your slice. If you use a paring knife, we're gonna slice this into, I think we want half rounds, half moons. So that's a half circle, basically. So we're gonna start with slicing it in half, one direction. And then I always like to use that flat edge to put it flat on my cutting board. That keeps something round nice and secure. When it's round, it moves around a lot, and that makes it a little bit more dangerous. But when you have a flat edge, that keeps it there and keeps it nice and secure, which makes it just a little bit safer to cut. So from here, always use your bear claw, and then you can slice this into your half circles. We want them to be kind of thin. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is the size I'm going for. And then if you are using a chef's knife, I like to use my chop. You can use your slice, push down, pull back. I like to use my chop, which is push down using the heel of the blade to do the cutting. You're going down and forward. Always, always, always use your bear claw. That will help prevent injuries. So we're going to be doing that with all of these radishes. Or if you do want it to be exact, until you have 1.5 cups, using your dry measuring cups to measure. And then some of you might have kind of a stringy root end. You can cut that off. This top kind of green part, you can cut that off. That's where the stem, like above ground, comes from. Radishes do add a little bit of spice, but it's different than spice that you would get from a jalapeno. If you've ever had horseradish, or if you ever had turnips, or if you ever had sushi with wasabi, those are all in the same family, and they add, it's almost more like it goes in your nostrils. Like, I don't know how else to explain it, but it is a little bit different type of spice, but it is spicy. Some people hate it, some people love it. If you don't like it, then avoid the radishes.
Sydney's eating the scraps that didn't make it in.
Nice. Love that, Sydney. My mom loves radishes and would just take a whole radish and put some salt on it and just eats those as a snack. That was like a common thing growing up for me. I always thought that was weird. I like it now, but when I was a kid, I was like, ew, that's gross. Luckily, with this recipe, we're cutting on that spice a little bit with the Greek yogurt. Creamy products like dairy, those cut the spice of things a little bit, so it makes it a little bit less spicy. Radishes are very common in Latin American cooking, specifically Mexican cooking. You'll notice if you go to like an authentic Mexican restaurant, they'll put radishes, fresh radishes, on top as a garnish. A garnish is kind of just like a last little touch that makes something look nice, adds a little extra flavor. So you'll notice on tacos, they are traditionally a garnish. Also, if you go to the farmers markets in the summer, there are different types of radishes. You'll traditionally really find these red radishes in our supermarkets here, but in the summer, if you do go to farmers markets, you'll find other kinds of radishes that are fun to try out. I like watermelon radishes. They are called that because they look like watermelons. They're green on the outside and kind of like a pale pink on the inside. All right, we are almost done here, and then we will continue cutting the rest of our ingredients for the slaw. Where are we at with time?
6:20.
Okay.
10 minutes-ish.
All right. The last part will be a lot quicker. I feel like the radishes in this recipe are definitely the most tedious, time-consuming part. So don't worry, I'm not going to keep you here all night. I want to make sure I respect your time. By the way, we do have a poll that I would love you guys to take before you leave, even if you leave right now or if you leave at the very end of this lesson. I know everyone has things they gotta get to, but either way, it should pop up, right, Mary Kate?
Yep, I just launched both questions.
Okay, so the questions will come up right away on your screen as you're logging out, and I would love you just answer. It's 2 questions. It should take you no time at all. That just helps us make these lessons better in the future. We want these to be as the best that they can be and useful for people. So answer those questions. Also, I'm sure this has already been happening, but if your name that you're using on your Google Meet link, like whatever Google account you're using, if that's your parent's name, I would love for you to put your name in the chat. So we've been writing down who is here. We're going to give everyone who came tonight a special prize. I'm not going to tell you what yet. You'll find out. But if you could just write your name in the chat if your name is not, if the name on your Google Meet is not your name, the student's name. So some of you might be using your parents' accounts. Definitely write your name in the chat if that's the case. I'm going to add these sliced radishes right into the bowl where I've been making my dressing. By the way, we love pictures, so you can text us pictures. We've been texting parents and guardians text messages about these lessons. You can reply to that and send pictures of your final creations. I'd love to see your little face with your creations if you so choose. You can also email us pictures. On the recipes we hand out in class that you take home every week, there's the email address that tells you where to send them. So I would love to see your final products if you want to share them with us. And you can also share them with us on our social media accounts on Facebook and Instagram. Our handle is @FoodRightInc. That is on all of our recipes, including the one we gave you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's right here on the one we gave you today. So, or on the recipe we're making right now. So you can follow us there and reply to us there or tag us there to send us pictures. We are going to be mincing these green onions for our radish slaw. With green onions, you can use the whole thing. Not everyone realizes that some people throw away the white part, some people throw away the green part, but it's all edible, it's all great. So I would recommend using the whole thing. The only parts you don't want to use are any slimy or brown parts, and then the stringy root at the bottom. That stringy root you can cut off. In class, we have been using scissors to mince. This is a great way to get younger kids involved. Try not to let yours go flying across the room like mine just did. Save from cleanup. But yeah, you just want to cut that right off, and you can use either, like I said, a scissors, you can use your paring knife, or you can use your chef's knife to cut that off. And then I like to cut multiple at the same time to save me time here. So the way I do that is I stack them all together, and then I will cut them in half and then stack those halves so that I can do a bunch at the same time. And then once again, you can use your paring knife to cut right through it. We want these to be very small pieces. We are mincing here. You can use a scissors. You can still stack multiple together and cut them into teeny tiny little pieces like this. Or the adults can help out and use your chef's knives, pinch grip, and then bear claw, and down and forward, cutting through all of them into teeny tiny little pieces. So you should have 4 green onions minced here, and then those will go into that same bowl as the radishes. Green onions, just like any herb, in this case we are using cilantro, which is an herb, are very cheap and easy ways to add a lot of flavor to a recipe. So green onions are milder than regular onions. I honestly always have green onions in my fridge. And I also usually have fresh herbs in my fridge because, once again, they are a cheap and very easy way to add a lot of flavor. I am not someone that likes flavorless food, and I like to find healthy ways to add a lot of flavor. So herbs and spices, that's my go-to. We have a bunch of cilantro here. You can measure this, once again, with your dry measuring cups to get the exact amount that you need. But we estimated for you, and I would recommend just using the bunch we gave you. We have been learning how to mince herbs in our U-Chef Academy classes in school. So everyone has already seen this before. But if you are using a scissors, you're gonna do it just like we did in class, where you pick off the leaves from the stem, bunch up those leaves, and then use your scissors to cut it teeny tiny. Once again, mince is cutting something very small. You can also just take your paring knife, take the whole bunch here. I like to cut it in half first, just like I did with my green onions, stack it so that I can be more efficient, get more done at the same time. Stack it together and then hold it with my bear claw, and then just do a slice through. I always use a slice with my paring knife, which is using the tip of the blade to do the cutting, and I push down and pull back. And then finally, you can also do this with a chef's knife. When you are using a knife to cut this, you don't have to pick off the leaves, because a knife will get these things, like this isn't bad to eat, the stem is not bad. It has a lot of flavor, it's just the texture isn't very nice unless you can get it very small. It's hard, it's very tedious to do that with a scissors, so we usually pick off the leaves with the scissors, but if you are using a knife, just leave it in there and make sure you chop it up very small. So with my chef's knife, for any adults helping out, you can just do a chop, which is a down and forward motion through your pile of cilantro. I like to gather it and turn it and then do my rock chop, just like we did with our garlic and our chipotle peppers. Every once in a while I'll gather it and turn it, and then do a rack chop through it until I have the size I want. I'm gonna go through it one more time. And then I'm just gonna add all of this to my radish slaw. The last ingredient for our radish slaw is a jalapeno pepper. I'm gonna show you how to seed this just like we did with our chipotle pepper. The first thing I do is, I'm gonna use a paring knife to show you, but you can use a chef's knife to do it. You're gonna cut it right down the middle, the long way, and you're gonna do a slice down and push down and pull back. I like to do a bridge when I hold something small and round like this instead of my bear claw. As long as your bridge is over the blade, that's safe, that's fine to do. So you're gonna push down and pull back so that you have two halves. I then use my paring knife to kind of make some cuts in here that will make this nice and easy to scoop out if you do want to take the seeds out. So this part right here, this inside and the seeds, that is the spicy part. If you like a lot of spice, go ahead and just leave it right in there. If you don't, then you're gonna wanna scoop this out. It's also the part that will burn your hands if you touch it. So try to avoid touching it. I like to use the stem to kind of avoid touching it. And then the skin on the outside that's how I hold it. If you do touch it, not the end of the world. You just wanna make sure you wash your hands right away and don't touch your face or eyes for the next 24 hours because it does burn. I've done that too many times to count, so it's okay if it happens. But then, yeah, I just use, just like I did before, I use the tip of my spoon. I just took that out of the bowl that I'm making the slaw in, and you're just gonna kind of dig into that and scrape it out, and then I just scrape out all those seeds. So I'll do that with half of mine. I'm gonna leave the other half in because once again, we like spicy here. And then we're gonna cut this into half moons. You can cut off that stem on both sides. And then either use, you could even use a scissors here. So if you have some younger kids helping out, especially if you have younger siblings, they can use the scissors to help do this. Just try to cut it thin. You can use your paring knife to slice into thin slices, or of course, you can use your chef's knife. I'm just gonna do both parts at the same time. I'm using my bear claw, my pinch grip, and my chop down and forward to do my half moons. All right, and then that gets added to the radish slaw. And then we'll mix that all together. And then this will be like a topping to our tacos. It smells so good and fresh and spicy. All right, now we're gonna finish off our lentils. This won't take long at all. We're just gonna be adding a little bit of oil. I'm using canola oil. You can use butter or whatever oil you have on hand. And we need 1 to 2 tablespoons. You can estimate this if you want. If I was just doing this at home, anyone who cooks pretty often can usually estimate this. But if you do want to measure it, you can always just start with 1. I'll do like 1.5 tablespoons to start, and you can add more as you need. Then I'm gonna turn my heat on to medium-high, so kind of between medium and high heat. And then I'm gonna use that spoon, the wooden spoon I've been using. I'm gonna create kind of a little hole in the center where I can cook my garlic. So you'll add your minced garlic to the middle. I'm gonna add my chipotle pepper and my adobo sauce. So this is all my minced chipotle pepper and adobo that we cut up. Get as much sauce out of there as you can. That's all delicious flavor. And then we're gonna add our cumin, which which came in a little packet with a CU on it. We did measure this for you, so you can just dump the whole thing in. I'm going to stir that a little bit in the center just so that it cooks a little bit. And then eventually we're going to mix this all in with the lentils. We just want this to cook for like 30 seconds to about a minute. Garlic burns easily, but when you cook it, it does release a lot of flavor. So you want to cook it just a little bit. Like usually you add it towards the end and let it just cook for 30 seconds to a minute. All right, and then I'm going to start just mixing this all together so it's nice and just really well combined. You can taste it at this point, and if you think it needs more flavor, you can add more cumin if you have it. That's a staple seasoning in my household. It's very common in Latin American cooking. It's common in Asian cooking. It's something that just is delicious, so I would recommend getting that if you're new to cooking. You can add some salt if it needs more flavor, even some black pepper. If you want more spice, you can add smoked paprika, cayenne pepper, red pepper flakes. Those would all be great in this recipe. So you just got to taste it and decide what you want and play with it. That's part of cooking, is experimenting and changing it for next time. It's the fun for me. All right, so this is good to go. I've mixed it pretty well. Let it fry for just, a minute or two. I'll turn it off the heat. The very last step here is just heating up our tortillas, which I recommend just doing this as you go. So if you have a family of 5 to feed, go ahead and make enough tortillas for the 5 of you. It's just Chef Mary Kate and me here, so I'm just gonna make each a taco. So I'm not gonna heat up all the tortillas. I'm just gonna show you how to do it, and then you can keep doing it after class if you are feeding more people. So we're just going to turn our heat. I'm using a skillet here. You can use a smaller one. You can also heat them in the microwave or in the oven, whatever you prefer. I'm going to show you how I do it. I'm going to turn my heat onto like medium high. And then we have our corn tortillas here. And we're just going to put into the pan. I'm just going to start with 2, do as many as you need. And then you can also you can either put 1 or 2 tortillas per taco. That's really up to you. Corn tortillas are notorious for breaking. So I'm going to cut this. This is taking me too long. So 2 tortillas will help prevent that from happening. So I'm going to put these in here, cook it for 20 to 30 seconds on each side, and just use your spatula to flip it. That plate and towel is, or if you want to use a Tupperware container, if you are making this for a whole family, you're going to be making tortillas, heating up tortillas, and then you'll need to keep them warm. So you're going to want to put them in here and keep them warm while you heat the rest. Once again, since there's just 2 of us here, I'm just making 2 right now. All right, it's probably been about 20 to 30 seconds. I'm gonna flip them. If you do heat them in the oven, I recommend about like 350 degrees heat. I do actually like to get them a little bit wet, not very wet. And then I honestly just put them right on the rack and let them heat for a minute or 2. And you can do the same thing with a microwave. You can heat them in the microwave. I do like to get them a little bit wet for the microwave as well. That keeps them from breaking. Corn tortillas are a whole grain. So corn is actually a grain. It is not a vegetable. Has a lot of great nutrients in it. And when you pair it with a legume, which once again lentils are a legume, you get a complete protein, which is just the best kind of protein for the human body. It's the kind of protein that we get from animal foods. So you don't need animal foods Not that I'm against that. I eat meat, but for your health and for if you ever want to save money, it's really helpful to replace some meals with just plant food ingredients. And this is a really great way to do it. It's just by pairing legumes and whole grains together. All right, so my tortillas are done. I have my tortilla here. I'm gonna add some of my lentils right into my tortilla. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of this radish slaw on top. And voila, lentil tacos with creamy radish slaw. Let's taste this, see how it turned out. That's delicious. Sorry. I hope you all enjoy. Once again, take pictures, send them to us. Make sure you take our poll. Make sure you put in the chat your name. If your name on your computer, on your Google account is not your actual name, if it's your parents' name, type your name in the chat before you leave so that we can make sure we know who all attended. And enjoy. I can't wait to keep cooking with you all. I'll see my classes the rest of the week. So a lot of you I'll see tomorrow and then Friday. Thank you all. Have a good night.